Our guest for today's episode is Siddhant Puri. He has graduated from UC Berkeley in electrical engineering and computer science. He has previously worked at UrbanClap as a software developer and is currently working at Bounce as a product manager. I am Mayank Khandelwal and you are listening to Whiteboard.fm. Hey Siddhant, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
Good man. So Siddhant, let's just get started with the interview. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sid. I been working at Bounce for the last year as a PM. I previously worked as an engineer at UrbanClap, and before that, I was in the Bay Area working on my own startup. And before that, I was at Berkeley studying computer science.
Nice. So Siddhant, how did you get started in product management? Like, what made
Uh,
you
so
want to do product management, considering you're a CS undergrad?
yeah, so I think if I go back into like my undergrad journey, I think what I really used coding was for like a means to an end. I wanted to like launch something or build something, and the part of building it was not as exciting for me as like the finished product. So I think that was like the first glimpse of it. Then I think when I was in third year, I like went and decided to run for student election. I felt there was not enough people in the from international students and engineers who were represented in student government. So I decided to run, and there I'd like launched my like first product of like a website which allowed students to upvote and downvote issues they wanted student government to handle. And I think like that's like my probably my first product launch and first like product experience. And after that, I was just I just had a craze for like launch like doing that.
Nice. Can you tell us more about your product? What that was during your college?
Yeah. So I mean, it was essentially a website which looked like Reddit. Students came and like put a platform they thought that the university like student organizations should help solving, and it was for like running for the Senate position in the student government. So essentially, what I was doing, I was launching my Senate campaign, and for that, I built this portal to like help like get interest from students that I was doing something different, and I wasn't like just trying to get votes and like promise a bunch of things. I was trying to like actually hear what they like found as issues. I think like listening to your customer is important, right? So like if you're not gonna like solve their problems, what's the point of you like being in that like position in the first place? So yeah, the website launched. I think what that taught me was like all the things that can go wrong in a product launch, right? So like we had everyone sharing the website, like announcing my campaign launch. The It was just sidpuri2014.com. It was like me running for election, and this was a portal where you could put in the ideas. Now, what happened was students started like putting their ideas, and then after like an hour, we saw like there was people who had like put in like garbage posts, and then the counter on that post kept increasing. And so it was essentially like someone wrote some basic like JavaScript to like keep adding counters to like garbage posts that were on the portal. So we had to like fix that issue in like 2 hours. Otherwise, the campaign would look like a joke. So I think like that's probably where yeah, you see like what all can go wrong with the launch and project. But eventually it all worked out. I think people really appreciated the initiative I'd taken, and people thought it was slightly different, and they liked getting their voice heard in general. So I think, yeah.
Nice, man. Also, so from what I've read in your Medium blog, you also created something called the Referral Network. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so the referral network came across from like projects I'd worked on while I was on campus. I had another startup which was like this virtual career fair platform. And what we were trying to do was get students jobs and opportunities through that platform. We would run like a virtual career fair, but it never really picked up that much. When I graduated, one of my friends was like hiring for like engineers for Uber. He thought like he'll refer his Berkeley friends and he'll be able to get like a referral bonus. So he asked me to help him out because I worked on that kind of stuff. And it started off like as a small Facebook post, and I realized that like people didn't take the Facebook post on a group that seriously. So overnight, I decided to build this Squarespace website, um, build like a simple Mailchimp mailing list, and I started like asking people to share it. So it made it look a lot more legitimate when actually behind the scenes it was just me collecting students' profiles to like refer them to a few jobs that I knew of. And students were like excited because I pitched it as something they'll get connected to alumni, which is what we were. Um, and it gave me like a good, like I was like right at the cusp of graduating, so I knew enough like CS majors in college as well as alumni who had taken jobs. And so I was like, oh, I'll just be a matchmaker between those two. So yeah, I think that's what I did, and it got a lot of traction in the first 2-3 days. And I used the organic shares I got on Facebook to launch ads and try to get like some early buzz around it. And that basic Squarespace website was like a lot more successful than any of the fancy products that we had built in while I was in campus, like an iOS app for like students and Android app for like they can apply for jobs. And this was here, it was just like a Squarespace like form.
Right. Great. So, Siddhant, did you directly after college go for a PM role, or did you find that later on that okay, now you want to like at some point of your career that okay, now I want to make a shift of getting into product management?
No, so I actually went down the startup route after launching this website, and I decided to. This was a problem I'd been trying to work on throughout my college experience. I wanted to continue working on it because I just didn't want to have that later on that like, oh, I could have done something with it and like let it go.
Right.
So I had a job at a professor startup, and I decided to not take that up and do my own thing for a while and see where it goes. And I think 2 years later, after like working on it, and after like getting a good chunk of students' jobs through it, I decided that it was too manual a problem, and I also didn't have enough experience to like know what I was talking about. And I think it was important for me to get that experience like of what working in a tech company was like, because it was all like my knowledge all came through like my undergrad academic education and whatever I read online, which works really well, but I just kind of wanted that solid experience. I went and decided to become an engineer at a small startup in the Bay Area.
Nice. And after that, Siddhant, you took the role of product management. You decided you wanted to get into product management, right? So,
Yeah, no, at the back of my head, I kind of always wanted to do product, but I also felt that until I became like a developer first, I like wouldn't really know what goes behind building products.
right,
And since I had like my like CS background, I wanted to like apply it to getting some engineering experience, like shipping products and building things, so that I know what goes behind it. So I did that for about 1 year at the startup in the Bay Area. Moved back to India, worked at UrbanClap for 6 months as a developer as well. I worked in the growth team over there, and then like I got an opportunity to work at Bounce as a PM, and so I took it because it's what I've been waiting for, like in terms of like what I thought I wanted to do next.
nice. Can you tell us more about how did you get into Bounce? How did you apply and what was the process?
Yeah, so I when I moved back to India like 2 years back, I spent a lot of time just getting to know the scene here,
Yeah,
because I'd been away for like 7 years. So I just spent a lot of like my first 3 months getting to know people and getting to know like I had a friend who worked for a VC firm, and she helped me get in touch with a lot of founders and product managers, engineers, And so it really helped me understand what the market was like. And when I came here, like it just made sense for me to uh, invest in those relationships. And I
Right.
think I ended up getting a job through like at UrbanClap through a different connect, because one of the founders went to Berkeley as well. And so, but then 1 year later, through one of my friends of friends, I got a like call saying that they were looking for PMs at Bounce, and one of my friends had recommended me. So I decided to go through that process, and that's how I ended up ultimately finding a job at Bounce.
Yeah. So what was the process at Bounce?
I mean, so I at the time, actually, I had I had an offer at hand, and the offer was for an engineering slash product role at a small startup in Mumbai, and Bounce like had just contacted me, and I spoke to the recruiter. She put me in touch with the head of product at Bounce, who was my manager now, and I spoke to him. He realized I had an offer, and then he asked me to work on a case, and then asked me to fly down on the following Monday. And by Tuesday, they had given me an offer. So it was like super quick because I already had like another offer in hand. And I was trying, the other offer was like engineering. It was like an engineering slash PM role, which is something I wanted to avoid because it became like a gray area where I would have to build the product as well
Yeah.
as PM the product. And so I really wanted the like a product specific, like a product only like role. And yeah, I like really liked the person I was going to work with, and then I took the plunge and moved to Bangalore. I was living in Gurgaon at the time, working at UrbanClap.
Great. Can you tell us the case that was given to you by your manager when you were applying for Bounce?
If I was the Netflix growth PM in India, what would I do?
Oh, nice.
And what would I do? Yeah,
And
so
what
it
was
was just like an open-ended problem.
yeah.
um, and interestingly enough, I came up with this whole pitch about I would invest in this kind of content and go after vernacular content and all that. And when I got to the interview, Aditya was just like, okay, I don't think this will work. So why don't you flip it? Like, I don't think Netflix would invest in not quality content. Like, let's say we had to only build for quality content, and you're the PM. Like, what would you do? And he like, so my whole case, he like went through the document just to see how I had formatted my thinking, and he said the structure looked good, but I wanted to think the other way around. Um, and I think and that was one of the problems I'd done. There's another problem where he had asked me to like, here's a 1,000 student class, and if you have 1,000 students, and you have to give one student an award, and you have like all their grades for every semester, how would you pick? So they were like very open-ended problems that like I think the main key point here is to like not answer the problem,
Right.
but to ask as many questions to understand what the what the problem is, like really what the problem really is, right? So I think that's like a PM interview will be very conversational, and similar to like an engineering interview, you would like have to find all the edge cases to figure out, okay, what is the person really asking, and then your answer like matters like very little, I would say. At the end of it, it's just the process that someone is like trying to get through.
Good stuff, man. Also, Siddhant, like you mentioned that before you wanted to get into the product role, you wanted to have dev experience or experience as an engineer, working engineer. Why is that?
So I just felt that I knew, like, I think everyone like thinks they can be good at product management, but until like like what goes behind building the products you're trying to like quote unquote manage, like how are you going to really like how are you going to really like succeed as a product manager? I think I don't think it's required. I just felt that for me at the time, it would be something that would like that experience would be useful. And I don't think you need to be an engineer for like 6 years before becoming a product manager. I just thought that like being a developer gave me a sense of what are the problems you face while trying to build something. Like you might think like building this simple form is like really easy, right? But there might be some dependency issues or some architectural issues that will stop that from being as straightforward. And I think that really helps. And I think empathizing with the engineering team is like part of your job, day-to-day job. And if you can't empathize and if you can't understand the restrictions that they're working under, like it's going to be difficult, and like that's going to like cause issues while you're trying to build those products.
Yeah. Can you tell us some instance where your experience as a developer has like helped you get an edge, or like, if not get an edge, help you out in a circumstance as a PM?
So I think overall, couple of things. Like I think, for example, um, we had no developers like that. We had developer bandwidth for customer care products at Bounce when I had come in, because we were trying to solve a lot of other things. And so, but the customer care team needed help.
Right.
And there's this product called like Retool that we use at Bounce now. But I had brought in Retool into the company to solve that problem of like building like a no-code app, so that we could let PMs and analysts build these like dashboards for the customer care team. Um, and I think like if I didn't like understand like how that like the internals of that product worked, and like how I could make the with like less developer bandwidth, how could I make this thing work? I would have just probably fought for like developer bandwidth there,
Yeah.
right? So um, I think that was one. I think another case would be like there was a bug in the in some specific product, and I just said like, I what can you check if like it's a null pointer or something? And that's like I think those kind of instincts are like kind of help in understanding like what if you can like kind of see what the problem probably is, you're like helping your team, you're like more resource for your team. And more than anything else, like I think you're not supposed to be an engineer. Like let me just put it that way. Like you're not supposed to be an engineer. What you need to really do is like be able to empathize with the engineer. So I think that's one thing. Like I think like people, the one thing that like developers might have like a difficulty when they move into a product management role is them trying to like tell the engineer what to do because they think they know better. Because like you're not an engineer anymore, and you probably don't know the nitty-gritties of the product and how
Right.
it's been built, right? Like something might seem very straightforward to you because I don't know, in your previous experience, you had that the team had built it in a scalable fashion, and it might not be so in the current role that you're in, because you don't know actually know what the architecture looks like. If you really want to know, then ask how the architecture works. Like get into the depth of it,
Yeah.
and then you can maybe understand like the limitations of the architecture itself.
Makes sense. So, Siddhant, can you tell us more about your work at Bounce? Like, what kind of space do you work in, and what responsibilities do you have as a PM in that space?
When I joined Bounce, I was one of the few consumer only PMs at Bounce. And my area was everything consumer at the time, like every, uh, that whether that was customer care, could be marketing one day, it could be an app issue one day. So I worked across the breadth, and that gave me a chance to absorb a lot of how everything worked and like solve small problems everywhere. And to try and help build what Bounce is today. Like a lot of the features that you see today, like a lot of the base work for that, I've like helped build. And so that's what I did. And now I've gone into a deeper side of the problem. I handle the activation funnel for Bounce right now. So I think KYC is like a big part of it. KYC is like the drop off in the funnel. It's a friction point. So solving those problems is what I like spend my time with right now. And I think I've had the luck, like I've been lucky where I've had breadth and now I get to have depth, which you only get to see in a company which goes from like 0 to 1 and then 1 to like trying to make optimizations, right? So a hypergrowth company like Bounce gives you that experience.
Nice. What would you have preferred more, breadth or depth?
I think having both is like is super lucky. I think I I I look at myself as a generalist. So I prefer breadth. I like easier. I find it easier to work in breadth because I like working like across many problems, and it keeps me excited in each different domain. But I
Yeah.
think right now what I'm getting is to do in terms of depth is super crucial for like to know like to become better at my job. Like knowing the depth of a problem is like what you're supposed to do. Like if you're just going around fixing a bunch of issues, sure, like a program manager could have probably helped also do that, right? So I think like first principle thinking and like system thinking would not come into the breadth role as much as it does in the depth role. If you're trying to get to like the why of a problem, only depth will help you there.
Right. Great.
Yeah.
So Siddhant, like in all these spaces, like in consumer products where you were working on so many aspects, what was your role as a product manager?
I think the role of like me as product manager at the time was a lot to do with execution. I think there's like three aspects of that are your like responsibilities. One is like the product strategy, which is like what are you trying to solve and how will you like what are the success metrics for that. There's prioritization, which is this a priority even to solve right now? And the third is execution. So I would say like a large chunk of mine was within already understood like a bunch of understood problems after like this prioritization and this execution. So I think I started off with like coming in and like trying to execute as much as possible, and over time I've gone into getting involved with like a lot of the prioritization discussions, and then now product strategy because I'm owning like one specific area. And yeah, sorry, did that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. It kind of did. That these were the roles that you were a part of when you were working as a PM in all those domains.
Yeah, and I mean I think see, one thing I'd like want to highlight is like in terms of um, a product manager is like it's like leadership that you're looked at as like a leader, but you have to earn that. And I think to quickly gain the trust of a team, you have to prove yourself, and you can do that with quick wins. So like that's why like the execution part on these small issues that like you need to solve like really helps. And I think in your first 30 days you should try to like absorb as much as possible, and like just always be curious. And like I think like you should look for edge cases, but also like understand that people are not also try to understand the history of the product, of why it's where it is in the state it is. And then the quick wins will like help you gain the trust of the team. And because you don't actually manage anyone as a PM, like I think that's like important to know that you don't have like the engineers don't report to you, the designer does not report to you, the business team doesn't report to you. All of them are like reporting to like different verticals, and you are like trying to get everyone on the same page, and you're not going to be able to get everyone on the same page without building that trust, because
Right.
you have to influence all these people. And like for that you need to like know the in-depth like problem of what the customer is facing, and like hear each side of the story of all these teams.
Right. Absolutely. Makes sense. Also, Siddhant, while you're working on so many features, I'm pretty sure you might have had to make a PRD or a product spec for each of them. So,
Yeah.
what are the differences for each space when you're creating a product spec or getting insights? How is it different for each domain? Like, how is it different for customer support? How is it different for any bug fixing for a particular, for KYC, for example, now that you're working in activation? So, how is it different?
So the core of the spec is the same, right? So if I had to break down the core of the spec, it would be the why. Like why is this a problem and why is it worth solving? It would be the how, which is how will we go about solving it, and that will have that the how will contain all the product flow changes you want, the user stories, and what backend has to change and what front end has to change to make this feature work that you're suggesting. And then you would have to come up with success metrics, like how will we measure that this product did was a success, and also keeping in mind all the edge cases, a success metric, and then like other edge cases that like might be something like you maybe you moved a metric that you were trying to move, and it affected another metric down the funnel that now is a problem. So you have to like mention all of that. Essentially, you have to build like the full picture from start to finish, and that's what like it looks like for all of the features. It's for all the domains, and I think across every different product vertical, like you'll have maybe more titles and subtitles, but this is like what you're trying to do in a spec. um, and what you're really trying to do is communicate. Like it's you like writing down a structured document which will help the engineering team understand like, okay, all I have to do is XYZ and like this feature will get built. Like design team to understand the problem, business team also to like understand the metrics that you're trying to move, and like you can say maybe you can, if there's anything that's an A/B experiment, or if there's anything that's behind a feature flag, all of that needs to be called out. Otherwise, it's going to get missed. And now, as if you look at like the difference between like customer support product and like maybe like a bug fix, I think if it's a bug fix, it could very small bug fix. It could be very well be a Jira ticket. You don't have to write a spec for like if every bug fix. But if you're going to like change an entire flow and you need a redesign, you're going to need like the whole spec and with the design and with the user stories with the success metrics. Um, in terms of like each of these domains, how does it differ? It's mostly about it. In some cases, it's just a pure app change. In some cases, it's a backend change. Certain features and certain like projects, like for example, I worked on coupon code, the coupon code management system. Now, the coupon code management system required to have every edge case possible that the backend team might run into. So let's say you apply a coupon for 100 rupees and there's tax on it. Sorry, you apply your ride is like 80 rupees, and then with tax it goes over 100 rupees, and the coupon is for a minimum 100 rupee ride. Now you're going to have to like write that edge case. What does it happen in that scenario? And like, does the customer think that the coupon code should be applicable or not? That should be something you should think about on the app side. Like, how would you communicate to the customer? So that's kind of, and so that document went like deeply into the edge case scenario. Whereas when we were like redesigning the customer support piece on the app, we were like moving from an old paradigm of like letting users call whenever they wanted to a new paradigm of like self-help, right? So over there we had to do a lot of like design studies to understand different like what different companies and different kinds of products did for customer support, because we were revamping it. We wanted to get the learnings from other areas and what use case actually fit us and what should we take as inspiration from there. So completely two different problems. One was handling, one spec went deep into like the edge cases, whereas one spec went deep into flows. So one spec might have a flow diagram to like show this screen to that screen to that screen, and one might have like a bunch of numbers to like say if x minus y is equal to z, then apply coupon code. Right. So that's kind of how it would differ, right?
Right. Also, so for example, like you mentioned, you had to go deep into the edge cases when it came to coupon code management systems. When it comes to customer support, what do you, how as a PM, how do you tackle problems which could be considered as edge case when users, for example, leave bounce vehicles anywhere randomly? So how do you tackle such problems?
I think categorization is key here. So helping your customer support team categorize these issues separately into I mean any CRM platform like Zendesk, Freshdesk will let you create tags and filters. So if you automate those filters, you can maybe help the team so that they know which issues are like worth like responding to as quickly as possible, and what issues you can you can like spend some time and like respond to later. So for example, on the app, if you're like in a ride right now and you're not able to, let's say, end your trip, now that becomes a problem where you should be able to reach customer support really quickly, versus like you just have a generic question about oh, like, can I use bounce in Mangalore? Now, both of them on will be customer support issues, but prioritizing and categorizing them will like become super important. What kind of what I think if you open any app which has like a really good customer support, they'll find a way to like get user support when you need it for sure. And when it's something that like maybe an automated bot can show, or maybe a self-help guide can show, it will be a different way to handle the issue. And
Right.
with scale, like, you're not going to be able to answer every call,
Yeah.
right? So you have to think about what is really important to solve from the customer's end. And for that, you really need to understand all the problems the customer could possibly have. If there's an edge case you missed there, that means you could like leave out a bunch of customers who fall into that bucket, but they have no way of getting support, or they don't have a clear idea of how to get support, in which case they'll go into your generic bucket, and they'll just overload your like general like questions, or they'll find a way to like go through your IVR flow to get to an agent because they can't find a way to like get support.
Right. So, Siddhant, like you said, once you're creating buckets or kind of following a certain approach, how do you test it to make sure that, okay, it's working out well? How is testing done?
uh, I think if you run a clean A/B test on a specific app version, that's the best way to test. Sometimes you will not be able to do that, in which case you'll have to know that, okay, maybe you launch something in this app version and previous app versions have this. What is the difference between the two? This is an easy way to test, but it's not the best way to test. So because what happens is you're not testing two scenarios that are like happening at the same time. Like maybe last week you didn't have as many like users you like having issues because your like bikes had less issues, but this week like the issues are more, right? So for that you need to run a clean A/B test for the users this week. That means you put X number of users in bucket A and X number of users in bucket B, and you see how the metrics are different for both cases. When you define the A/B test, you should like define what would make it a success.
Okay. All right. Right. So, Siddhant, you also said that you were working in growth, right? So, can you tell us more about what specifically in growth?
I mean, activation comes under growth right now, so like I
Okay.
work on that regards, but also um, a lot of the projects I worked on were like building the 0 to 1. So coupon code system, we had a coupon code system which was old and only in the payment section of the app, which let you only add money to your bounce wallet through the coupon codes. So we had to build a coupon code system that was a lot more generic and you could apply to a ride level. Um, and without that, it you can't enable the growth team to run experiments. Maybe they want to like run a cashback experiment um, versus like an instant discount experiment. Like if you don't have that capability, then your growth team cannot run experiments. If your app instrumentation is not correct, let's say you need to send a push notification when a user reaches one screen and it does not complete the KYC. If your app instrumentation is not correct, that these are the users who didn't complete and these are the users who completed. Uh, if you can't differentiate between the two, you can't send the push notification you want to send. So a lot of the stuff for growth that I worked on was like setting up the growth team for success, so that they can focus on running their campaigns, running their experiments, and trying different things out. And I think yeah, when you're in that stage of solving a lot of problems, that and you need to figure out what is important, you need to like invest in the right things. Like we didn't build a coupon code system from like day one. We had a system which was working, and we needed to know like when was the right time. Okay, now we've reached the stage where we cannot use the old one anymore and we need to launch this by X date. So yeah.
Right. Also, so Siddhant, what challenges have you faced when you're working as a product manager, and there are certain places where either you have to follow an approach which is a controlled approach, or you have to go follow something towards randomness?
I think it's depending on the problem and like the size of the problem and like how confident are you about the problem. Like if a specific flow is just broken, you need to fix it. There's you can do that without like looking at much data saying, okay, this app flow is broken, this should definitely come after this and we need to fix that, versus you want to like send up a pop-up for some specific issue that you're asking a customer for. Now you want to experiment that. You're not sure if the customer is going to like the pop-up or not. You might want to like experiment with the pop-up, uh, like we have a rate us feature that I built. Like after if you give a 5-star rating X number of times, you get a rate us pop-up. We also had a rate us in the app, which like allowed you to see whether like users you could in the sidebar click on rate us and rate on the Play Store. Now we were seeing like bad reviews coming from there because people who were facing customer like issues, instead of contacting support, they were just going and like writing a bad app review. So like looking at the data and like trying out, like we experiment by removing that section and kind of controlling the experience of like rate us. Now we weren't sure if that was going to work, so we needed to like run a quick test by like just taking that feature off and seeing if it worked.
Right.
So it's really about the stage of the problem you're in and like where you are. Like a lot of like last year was 0 to 1 where we knew we had to fix this, and a lot of like I would say January onwards was optimizations. Like I already know this funnel is pretty good. How can I make it better? I have to like go off an hypothesis, and a lot of times I'll be wrong. So I need to keep asking myself, am I doing the right thing? Which is challenging.
Correct. Can you tell us what a normal day at Bounce for you is like as a PM?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a normal day would like look like is I would probably have a list of things from like that I have for the next like app launch that and the next release that I'm planning for, and I need to like make sure all the that stuff is like on track. So I would start with getting all the things that are like P0s out of the way by like maybe I need to go talk to an engineer, and this will change day by day. Some days um, I will spend the first like hour like talking to leadership and maybe talking to the business teams to like suggest like influence them on like an idea I have, and like maybe try to convince them that this is what we should do. On another day, I will do none of that, and I will probably just be like working closely with an engineer to like figure out where are we on this release, what is like blocking him or her, and how can I help. Maybe the PRD is not clear, so I'll go rewrite the PRD and like rewrite a certain section of the PRD. Maybe the instrumentation is missing, so I'll like write uh, I'll rewrite the instrumentation to like, so that it makes sense. Maybe what's missing is like there's not enough data to make this to make this claim, and the growth team wants to know why are we doing this and what will it fix. Now if I have enough data to prove that what I'm saying is right, then that's not a problem. But maybe I'm missing a piece, and maybe someone wants to question. So I'll spend the day with my product analyst to figure out the actual problem. So it can vary a lot, and I think it's very easy to like let your day go away in meetings. That will be most of the day will involve meetings for sure. But it's like you have to like really protect your own time so that you can do what you're supposed to be doing, and you have to be like a lot of people will try to pull you in everything because since you work with every team, they'll just think, oh, this is Sid should be involved in this meeting because he handled this from the growth side, or Sid should be involved in this meeting because we need his design input here. But like sometimes I need to like excuse myself away from the meeting so I can get what I'm trying to get done that day. So yeah, I think the prioritization of your own time is like super important, and like um, you need to figure out in the beginning of the day, what are you trying to achieve that day?
Makes sense. Also, Siddharth, throughout like so far, you mentioned a lot of times about getting the right kind of data when you're
Yeah.
working on a product spec or when you're working on fixing a couple of your funnels. So, how do you decide as a PM where to get data from or where to insert data points to collect data to run tests?
So I think couple of things. You could be looking at the data you might have, but the data might not be giving you the full picture. So in uh, with the data, you might want to, like, let's say you are saying X number of users are doing this on the platform, and it's taking them an average of 3 minutes to get through this flow. Now that data in a metric like average is very dangerous, because it could mean that like 10% of your users are taking like 99 minutes, but like most of them are taking like only most of them are getting 1 minute, or maybe all of them are like within the 2 to 5 minute range. So breaking up your data into ways where it makes sense and tries to give you tries to give you an idea of what is happening in the customer journey is important, right? So, or what is happening internally at Bounce is important. Like, if you're looking at the data and you're just like, here's a funnel and here is the average uh, time it takes for the customer to go through this funnel, uh, that would be easy.
Right.
You can do that once and track and like be like, okay. And what if you do really good dashboarding? If you see a spike somewhere, you need to investigate that almost always. So you should focus on like first understanding the problem. What are you trying to solve? And then get the data for that problem. And try to like try to get try to try 5 6 different approaches until you understand, okay, this is how I want to actually measure this. um, Maybe I'm trying to verify, maybe I'm trying to understand how many people are getting verified on a particular day, and I'm saying, oh, X number of users are getting rejected. Now I want to understand why they're getting rejected, and maybe I want to understand the people getting verified, should they get verified.
Right.
um, and for that I have to dig deeper into more filters and creating more cohorts of, like, let's say, this kind of user, can I find more of these users, and uh, seeing what their journey is like. So I think one thing is that averages are dangerous, and like looking like and try plotting it. Like, honestly, like if you plot it, you might see the picture more easily than maybe when it's in numbers. Um, a, a lot of that is like anyone can say, okay, what is this metric? But you have to understand whether that metric is giving you the picture or not.
That is, so basically, this is about how do you figure out what kind of data do you require. But after you have that part sorted, how do you go to the next step? That is, how do you actually get that data when you're sitting with the developers?
I mean, you need to be good at like SQL to pull that out, to pull that data out. Or if you are lucky enough to have like an analyst on your team for that project, maybe the analyst can help you out. But I would say like all PMs should be really good at pulling out the metrics they require, and should know where that data lies. And even if they do have, a couple of analysts who work with them on this team, you need to like be sure of what the analyst is saying as well is what actually is the problem. Maybe the query is written in a different way, and if you go around presenting the wrong data, it can lead to a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And I think firsthand I can tell you, like, if you do not like double check all those things, it definitely leads to problems.
Right. Siddhant, you also said that you've been a part of Bounce when there were only like 8 PMs and 50 engineers. But then there's been a hyper growth as well. So how has your working changed, and what challenges have you faced in this like massive growth?
Yeah, I think it's been like a pleasure to be part of like this hyper growth journey for Bounce. Like, when I joined, we were just getting like building the team really quickly, because we knew like the phase we were about to go into, and we were going to be putting out more bikes and trying to expand into a new city. So I think the biggest part of the biggest part of like being part of this journey, as what I've learned, is that I think when I came in, I had to just, like I said, execute a lot. I knew all these problems. I needed to fix A, B, C, D by the end of the week. And it was like trivial stuff that like needed to be fixed, and trivial stuff that we had to add, or trivial screen that we needed to put. But getting that execution done with the limited bandwidth you have is a different problem.
Right.
And even fighting for those features, why is the feature important, or why is this problem worth solving, is important. Like you need to like get into like a quick debate with like maybe the head of product, or maybe the engineering manager, saying that no, we do want to like actually fix this, and we want to deprioritize this. So ruthless prioritization is like always important, and but even more so when you're in that growth phase and you don't have enough time to solve all the problems. And you as the company goes through that hypergrowth phase and the team changes really quickly, you need to like understand how dynamics change. Like what you thought about like how to look at your work and how to do your work will change tremendously. Suddenly, like when I joined, there was like no growth team, for example. And suddenly there's a growth team, there's an asset safety team, there's like operations team that is like tripled. Like all of that will happen, and you'll have a suddenly there's like a lot of leaders that you need to go show all your features to and get approval for, right? And that requires a completely different skill set. You need to be able to influence and prove to like everyone that you have taken into account their side of the problem, and this thing will not impact them, or it will impact their domain in a positive way. And I think so you have to learn all of that really quickly, because you might have new engineering managers joining, you'll have new PMs joining, new senior like directors joining, and you need to like in while all of that is happening, you need to also ship your product.
Right.
While all the internal dynamics are changing, that you need to ship a product. But I'm a strong believer that like in chaos, typically like you build the best stuff. So like it has been a chaotic year, but it's been like a great journey in terms of you learn a lot, and you try to ship the best product that you can.
Nice. If there was anything that you could change in the process or during your work, in your workflow, what would that be?
I think in terms of like what I would change them in my workflow would probably be I need to like become much better at writing, because I think after a certain point of time, like when you have like a document where you have like clearly like structured what the problems are, and you have clearly like given the engineering team, you've thought of all the edge cases and you've written it out in the language that like makes perfect sense for them. You've articulated to the design team what the problems are, and even writing just doesn't mean like PRDs, it also means like emails, it also means like how like you communicate. And like COVID has specifically taught us that like how much that like writing is important, right? Earlier you would just go like knock on someone's shoulder and be like, hey, how do you fix how can I fix this, or like how does this work, and or when is this coming? You can't do any of that now. And so like writing out your product strategy, writing out your roadmap, writing out why it's important to solve this specific problem. Yeah, that really helps, because otherwise what will happen is if I have to go explain the same thing to like 5 people over 5 meetings that day, instead I can like write a well documented structured document where I can like document all the problems that I've been looking at and what I think the solution could be, or what my thinking is. If I can put that on in like a written format, then it will help everyone getting on the same page much more easily. And I've learned that in like recently on a lot of the stuff. earlier I would be, I would think writing is going to take time. Like I don't need a document. I know the roadmap in my head and like I can do that. But that doesn't work after a certain stage. You know, and that with more people, more team members, more people are going to ask you like, why are you building what you're building?
Right. Siddhant, what are some of the tools that are used at Bounce by PMs?
We use Confluence and for writing documents, Jira for like tickets. We use Metabase for like writing queries on like to get data, to pull data out. We use CleverTap for engagement and for instrumentation of the app. So, and we use Retool to build internal apps. Um, Other than that, Google Sheets, Google Docs. I personally use Notion to kind of manage some of like my personal notes, and Google Calendar a lot.
What is there any tool is in particular that you guys use for analytics and data?
CleverTap. We use
Okay.
CleverTap and we use Metabase to pull our data from our own database. Um, yeah, CleverTap purely because in terms of like it's like really good for engagement, and they're like building a lot of features for analytics as well. They have the basic funnels and cohorts there. So if you instrument your data properly, you'll be able to utilize it well.
Nice. Siddhant, what are some of the workflow changes that you faced because of COVID?
Like I said, I think meetings, a lot of meetings. Like now it's become more and more important to protect your calendar as much as possible. And like now I get time to think and before I like speak. A lot of the time people, when they're in the office, they'll go to someone, they'll speak, and then they'll think while they're speaking. Like they know they need to go talk to someone. So I'll go to, let's say, an engineer I know I need to speak to him about something. I don't have the clear thing in my head. Now when I contact that person, I will contact them with a slightly more like intently written, like even if it's a question, like I know why I'm asking the question. Is it important to ask?
Right.
So I think it's really important to respect each other's time. And yeah, one thing that has been difficult has been the boundary between work and life. So I've been trying to like not as much as possible to not like work on weekends so that I at least build that boundary because it's now there's no boundary like the weekends feel like weekdays and weekdays feel like weekends. You need to like know when you're working and when you're not working. It could be as simple as not opening your laptop on Saturday, Sunday, even if you're like watching TV or something, you can watch it on your phone or something, just to get yourself in a different mindset. Or I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I try to do all my chores on the weekend. So I'll just put on an audiobook, so my mind goes into a flow of yeah, I'm not working right now.
Yeah. Siddhant, if for anyone who wants to get started in a product management role, anyone who's in college and wants to get started into product in the product field, what would you suggest? Like, how can they get started?
So I think product is a play is an area where nobody like learns in college like how to be good at product management, and everyone comes with like their different set of expertise. So if you were previously in engineering and moved to product, or you were previously in consulting and moved to product, or you were previously in design moved to product, um, all those journeys are possible. So my advice would be like try to map out what you're doing right now and how that will help. Maybe if you were a PM and if you have PMs in your company, like what they do, how can you help them, and how can you get a better understanding of what their job is, because it's also a job which is fairly like new and not as
It's quite
much has
dynamic.
been. Yeah, and it's not clear, it's not clearly defined like an engineering role or a design role. Product role is like kind of all over the place in terms of like some companies will have PMs who do a certain responsibility, and some companies like don't have PMs there at all. So it becomes difficult to like know what's like what is a PM's job. if you're in like engineering, you can try and see how your current engineering background will relate to product. Or if you're in data, you can try and see how your current data background will you at the end of the day, you're going to have to convince someone to take a chance on you for product, which is and why. And that why should be clear for you. And you should be fairly confident that yes, I did XYZ in the past, and this is why I think a PM I'm suited for a PM role. I can highlight like what I think is a like what are strong skill sets if you want, or
Yeah,
like I
exactly.
can go.
Because I agree with the fact that that a student, it would be much more difficult for a student to get it to try for a PM role, because since there are no predefined requirements, since it's so dynamic, there are no particular predefined requirements. But if someone had to start preparing or build like experience such that they can pitch to someone that this is why I would be good as a product manager in your company, what skills would they require? For example, one of them is understanding of tech. Another thing is understanding of data and analytics.
Yeah.
So, what such things do you feel are the requirements for the role of a PM?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's some core basic stuff that you like should have, which is like having SQL skills, having an understanding of tech, like you said. I don't think an engineering or CS background is required.
Yeah,
But what, like I said, it might help you in is the ability to relate to engineers, grasp technical concepts quickly. Some of those things you can, if you have a bare minimum understanding of how these products are built, then you can probably build upon that. What's really important is like communication skills. Like, um, are you see, a PM is going to like be the person who a lot of people are going to like feel like is not listening to them. So I think when you're communicating, you're not like a job of the leader, like because you're the product manager does not mean you have to talk over everyone and tell them what to do. You have to actually listen and make everyone feel like you're listening to their side, and everyone should feel like you understand their side. um, and so communication becomes super important. I like I said, I think earning your spot as a in the product team, like showing that you are somebody who they can like engineers can trust with like the features you're suggesting, because you've proven yourself. So I think um, what really matters here is like you being able to take all the pieces that of like you need to know a little bit of all these things. And so I think generalists tend to do well. People who are in like people who are involved in student organizations in colleges while they're doing engineering, or people who picked up skills while they're very curious, so they went and did a bunch of user research and like did a product breakdowns. That's a good way also to get involved. Like why did let's say why did Uber build this feature? Like, can you understand what goes behind it and maybe write a blog post about it? And I think yeah, I think it's a little bit of all those things. And at the end of the day, you need to really understand customers.
yeah,
Like you need to be able to understand like the users. Can you talk to users? Can you are you and you have to do like a PM's job is like it sounds very glamorous, but a lot of the stuff you do is not glamorous at all. You're supposed to do all the dirty work that nobody else wants to do. Are you comfortable with that? Then only would I say like go ahead with it. It's a relatively uh, stressful job in the sense like there's no line where your job ends.
yeah,
See, if you're an engineer, like you build this feature within this week, that's good. Like you did your job. There's a clear answer of whether you delivered or not. If you from the design team had to deliver on a specific design, there's a clear answer whether you delivered your role or not. Your PM's job doesn't end until like the problem is solved and each aspect has done their bit. And if some part is not getting done, it's your headache.
yeah,
You need to be comfortable with those like stressful situations and comfortable with ambiguity. Like there's no black and white solution to the problem. there's always going to be trade-offs. Can you make those decisions? Can you like adequate, like you have to be a critical thinker, because you'll have to like play devil's advocate with yourself all the time. Let's say you're sitting with like one team and you're always going to be trying to be devil's advocate for like what that team is asking for, but at the same time like communicating really well so that you are not upsetting the team. Like someone will come and tell you, I need this feature, and you have to like learn how to say no when it's required, and you need to like know when to listen and be like, yeah, we definitely need that feature, and we're working on it, we've heard you, it's in the roadmap. Like managing those relationships become like really, really key.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Siddhant. This brings us to the end of our interview. Like, this was super insightful. Like, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to learn a lot from it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, dude. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode, and I hope you liked it. If you watched the entire video, drop a comment below saying you're never too young to be a founder to let us know. Subscribe to the Whiteboard.fm YouTube channel to check out other episodes and clips from this interview. This podcast is a part of the 10K Designers Network. You can check out other projects on 10kdesigners.com.